What's up, peers, and welcome to Open Source Everything, here live on the World Crypto Network. Today, we continue the discussion about one of the most awesome, most useful peer-to-peer exchanges that we have in Bitcoin. We are continuing the discussion about HodlHodl, Hodl, of course, where you can check out at HodlHodl.com. And we're joined by the co-founder, Roman. What's up?
Hey, Max. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining again. Always a pleasure talking to you and all the amazing entrepreneurs who are in Bitcoin and getting real work done. So last time we talked at the white paper anniversary party. So anything interesting happening since then? How have you been?
Yeah, just lots of work. Lots of new features are coming in 2019 on HodlHodl. Hodl. And as I mentioned previously to you in a personal conversation, we have an exciting announcement to make, maybe at the end of this week, maybe beginning of next week. But things are going great. I think it's a great place to be when you have a great team working on exciting features that our users actually want. And we actually talk to our users, and they're all excited and they're all looking forward to the things that we're going to release.
Oh yes, I'm very much looking forward to this myself. And the user the communication with the users is something that you truly treasure at HodlHodl. Hodl. And it's evident, it really is clear. You have a beautiful user interface, good design, and fast support, which is important, right? Especially with such a critical thing as money. The communication has to be there. And if you do not know what is going on with your money, well, that puts you in a bad place as a user. So how do you at HodlHodl make sure that there is good communication with the people that actually are using your software?
Well, because we use the channels that regular people use on a daily basis. Like we have a Telegram account, we actually have a subreddit, we have a Slack channel for our users, and of course email, Zendesk, whatnot. All those things, and they just communicate with us with their preferred method of communication, and we just make sure that we respond as fast as possible, because like you said, when it comes to dealing with money, people tend to become really impatient, and if you don't handle their requests, it really is the reputation of the exchange can deteriorate rapidly. So gotta be careful with that.
Oh yes.
I think my co-founder Max, who was supposed to talk to you today but couldn't make it. But actually, it's one of his achievements. I think he's been thinking about building a really great support for the exchange from the beginning. He thought it was really important, even if we don't have lots of volume. He thought it was important to respond to people as fast as possible. So he took care of that part of the business, and he essentially also manages the support team. So.
Perfect. And really the communication is key, right? The transparency and the aspect of being peers on a network, of being able to talk to each other and making sure that we are on the same page, have the same consensus of what this business is all about. And so this is really cool. And you integrate a lot of new features based on what the users actually want to have. So maybe let's start off with the base trading contract that you used, which is a 2 out of 2 multi-signature. So in HodlHodl, how does this work, and how do you utilize the power of a true smart contract, which is Bitcoin multi-sig?
Right, very simple. The seller locks his Bitcoins or Litecoins in escrow, and an escrow is essentially a P2SH Bitcoin address or Litecoin address. And for those of you who don't know what it is, you can easily Google that and look it up on Wikipedia and Bitcoin Wiki. But the point is, this address is just a smart contract that says that it requires 2 keys to release funds from it. And one key belongs to the seller who actually locked funds in escrow, and the other key belongs to HodlHodl, that is us. And when the buyer marks contract as paid, that is, he transferred fiat currency to the seller, then the seller is supposed to release the funds to the buyer. And if he does that voluntarily, we also sign our part of the contract and the funds are released. Something goes wrong, there's a dispute, then we'll look at it. If we side with the seller, we can sign our part of the refund transaction. Obviously, the seller would do the same because he's interested in getting back his Bitcoins or Litecoins. In case we side with the buyer, though, then the funds would remain locked until the seller actually decides to release them, which he might never do. And for that reason, recently we introduced 2 out of 3 contracts, 2 out of 3 multi-signature contracts, in which case, instead of 2 keys that are, instead of having 2 keys in total, you would have 3 keys, and 2 keys are still required. Any 2 out of those 3 keys are required to release the funds. And the 3rd key in that case would belong to the buyer. And so if there's a dispute, you wouldn't have a situation where Bitcoins or Litecoins would remain locked forever. So that was one of the features that was requested by our users, specifically large OTC traders, and they are already using it.
Oh yes, perfect. So was there ever a problem with the 2 out of 2 multi-sig in the sense that funds were locked up forever because the buyer the seller of Bitcoin did not sign the transaction? Did that ever happen at HodlHodl?
No, not to my knowledge.
Well, which is great, right? But why is that? Because you think that doesn't even necessarily have to be malicious. It can just be accidents, right? Someone forgets his private seed, and well, that's it, right? Funds are locked. So why do you think that has never happened?
Maybe because we still don't have like volumes as large as local Bitcoins or other exchanges. I mean, eventually it's going to happen, or maybe more people would opt out for 2 out of 3 contracts, and they won't ever use 2 out of 2 contracts. And in that case, we may never see the case that you're describing. So.
Oh, very interesting. I actually did not know that, because I thought that maybe sure that some contracts or some contracts just went bust and were never responded again. But that's really good to hear that there's actually no locked up funds in HodlHodl or with this multi-sig scheme.
Well, most of the cases we had where people tried to scam other people, their counterparties, those were buyers trying to scam the sellers. So sellers would lock funds in escrow, and then the buyer would say, "Hey, I actually sent fiat currency," which he didn't even try to prove. I remember this one really insane case. The buyer, like, he didn't even put effort into his scam attempt, and it was so obvious for us that we refunded the transaction, and that was it. But so far, as far as I know, again, I'm not the support team. I don't handle all the disputes on a daily basis. But as far as I know, there were no cases where funds remained locked in escrow. So,
and interesting is, right, that everyone can easily prove that he has initiated a Bitcoin transaction. Right? If you have the transaction key, if it is included in a block, and if you maybe even can sign with your private key, the same private key, a message saying that you issued this transaction, then you can prove this, right? Quite easy. However, in the fiat world, it's rather tricky to prove that you actually have sent these funds. So how do you go in that dispute process? How do you make sure that the funds were actually sent to fiat?
So a couple of things. We're using TLS Notary. So we ask people, I mean, I'm not going to go into details of what it is, but again, those interested can Google that. So they would need to use that software to sort of sign, let's say, their banking statement or things like that, that would actually prove that they sent funds. And then we look at every particular payment method and country. Sometimes we would ask for a bank statement or a slip or anything that would potentially prove that. Those are tricky, I agree, because once again, banks do not provide us with the definitive information of whether funds were sent or not. And if we're talking about other payment systems, they might be even more sort of closed to the outside world. So it's tricky, but so far it's been working for many peer-to-peer exchanges, including local Bitcoins and Paxful. And in that case, in terms of dispute resolution, we're not very different from them at all.
Okay.
Except for the fast support. I honestly like local Bitcoins guys. I like Paxful guys. They both have been to the Baltic Honey Badger conference this year and last year. But from what I hear, even from our customers, their support is very slow. So we're trying to outdo them in that respect.
Yeah, and that is a nice, unique selling proposition, is that you are active with the community and fast with the support. So really interesting. And although there was no fraud and no locked up funds in the 2 out of 2 multi-sig, you still added the 2 out of 3 multi-signature option. So why did you do that? What were the user requests that made you take that action of including this 2 out of 3 scheme?
Well, quite simply, large OTC traders approached us and said, hey guys, we want to use your exchange, but we aren't going to do that if you have 2 out of 2 contracts. Implement 2 out of 3 and we're with you. And that's what we did. And to be honest, we ourselves did not feel comfortable locking large sums of money in 2 out of 2 escrow. That's just not the way we wanted to go.
Yes, exactly. Because when you only have 2 out of 2, if you only lose one key, that's it. Only half of the keys, and it's gone. The money's locked up forever and irretrievably so. So it can never be gotten back again. That's just how cryptography works, right? And so with the 2 out of 3 multi-signature, the buyer of the Bitcoin, the seller of the Bitcoin, and HodlHodl Hodl each have one key, and any 2 out of these 3 keys can send and spend these Bitcoin that are locked up. So how is the game theory different in a 2 out of 3 multi-sig scheme?
So I think this question is actually, it would better be addressed to the actual users of the exchange, because depending on the jurisdiction they're operating in, depending on the payment method that they're using, they would choose one type of contract over another. We can't yet tell which types of contracts are more popular in certain countries, simply because we released this 2 out of 3 feature just recently, right? So not a lot of people had a chance to use it and see the difference. But it's going to be interesting, nevertheless, to see what's going to happen in a year. Which type of contract would be more preferred by users in certain countries and for certain payment methods. So I'm not sure about the implications here. So we're yet to see that.
Well, at a minimum, right, it gives the buyer of Bitcoin a chance to get his word out, right, and in a cryptographic way. So if the buyer is of the opinion that he has sent the fiat, right, and then he can at least have 1/3 or half of the signatures that are required for this transaction. And in the best case, right, if everything goes right, both the buyer and the seller will sign their transaction. And this means that HodlHodl is never involved in any of the signing. Is that correct? Or do you always co-sign with every transaction?
Theoretically, it is possible that we would not be involved. It's just that technically it makes sense for us to sign the transaction that was signed by either side, right? It's just easier in terms of like the software that we develop. But theoretically, since both the buyer and the seller, they have the necessary number of keys to release the funds, they can do that without us. Like if they can code and create a transaction themselves, they can do that for sure, and it wouldn't involve HodlHodl Hodl at all. But just for the sake of simplicity and speed as well, we do sign the transaction. So, for example, if the contract is completed and all sides agree that everything went fine, then the seller would sign his sign of transaction, and we would automatically sign that same transaction. And the buyer, even if he's not online at the moment, he would receive his transaction in his wallet, right? So he wouldn't need to be on the site to sign anything. So that makes it for much faster completion of contracts.
Yes, and especially with trades, right? With financial trades, you need to be quite fast and quite quick. Because if you take too long, then the price of Bitcoin, especially as such a volatile asset, has moved already quite a bit. And
right.
This means that either the buyer or seller might carry a financial loss, at least the opportunity cost of selling or buying at the later stage.
Correct.
So,
we just don't want to be. We don't want to be in a situation where, like, the buyer had to go somewhere and is away from his computer, but he sent funds to the seller already, and he expects the seller to send him funds into his Bitcoin wallet. But then he comes back to the site and he sees the he actually needs to sign the transaction to receive the funds, and he's like, "Why didn't you do that?" Right? It would just add additional time to the whole process. So why would you want to do that? So that's why we sign the release transaction automatically, if both sides agree that the contract is completed.
Yes. So could there ever be a case where you sign the transaction and release the Bitcoin, although the fiat currency has not yet been transferred? And what are your measures against that?
No, because we wouldn't ever do that, because the seller, he only signs his part of the transaction when he's actually sure that he received the funds. That is, him signing the transaction essentially says, I agree that this contract is completed and that I received fiat, right? So there's no way.
Oh yeah, that's actually true, because the signer gives us approval of the Bitcoin being released.
Correct, and we would never sign the transaction if the buyer signed it, unless there's a dispute, and unless we actually resolve this dispute in favor of buyer. It's just the only way the transaction is signed automatically is when the seller signs the release transaction to the address that was specified in the contract.
Oh yeah, makes a lot of sense. That way you're efficient, you're fast, but still secure. Right? And then when there is a problem, and when you do need to double check and triple check, you can take your time and still resolute the dispute as efficient as possible.
Yep.
So quite nice. Then 2 out of 2 is the most basic multi-sig, right? 2 out of 3 is another really common multi-signature scheme. Are there any other multi-sigs that you're interested in at HodlHodl? Maybe a larger key size?
So our library right now, our multi-sig library, allows us to do essentially any number of keys. Well, the only restriction is like Bitcoin itself, right? I think up to 20 or 25 keys are actually allowed until we have Schnorr signatures and all of that. So there's a limit, but theoretically we can do a lot more than just 2 out of 3. The question is, and I think somebody asked this question at the conference as well, why don't you do this number of signatures? And I said that it adds a lot of complexity to the user interface and user experience, and you got to be really careful adding the number of signatures. So we're trying to explore this. We're trying to see how people are going to use 2 out of 3, whether there are any problems with it, and then move forward and maybe introduce other types of contracts. I think other more signatures would be useful, in contracts that don't necessarily involve exchanging fiat into crypto and back, but rather it would make sense for other types of contracts that involve, selling something for Bitcoin or buying something for Bitcoin, like, large shipments of goods or whatnot. That would make sense. Or real estate.
Yes. Okay. Quite reasonable. And complexity is always tricky, especially with money. Right? If you have a 7 out of 12 multi-sig or some crazy thing, that means if you lose a couple of these keys, well, you're fucked basically. And even if you want to sign it, you have to get 7 keys out of maybe even cold storage. And make sure that they are signed, that nothing goes wrong in the signing process. So it adds a lot of stress and uncertainty, which especially for a easy-to-use peer-to-peer exchange, you want to minimize.
Yeah, I mean, peer-to-peer exchanges are complex already. It's just, I don't even know all the features that we have. No, I'm kidding. Of course I do. But it's just that there's so much business logic, and when I look at the code that our team writes, I always ask questions. Oh, but how does this work, and why does it work this way? And I realize that even though I do understand it, our users have no idea. Many of the users that we have, to be honest, they still are not sure whether we actually hold the funds. They might be using the exchange for different reasons. At least for now, they're not aware of that. And we're trying to educate them. We obviously have all sorts of frequently asked questions section on the website, and there are screencasts, and we try to address their concerns in our Telegram group as well. So it's about education and just trying to communicate to people that an exchange doesn't actually hold funds. It's it's a step forward. It's something it's something to be used in the future, and it is in line with the argument that unless you control your own keys, you don't actually control your Bitcoins. And in our case, people would control their Bitcoins.
Yes, and that is really the key aspect, the non-custodianship of HodlHodl, which is why most of the people that ask me on where to buy Bitcoin, I first sent them to HodlHodl. Right? It is quite usable, and it is rather trustless. Right? And although BISC might be a network that is even more decentralized, right, and the same level of peer-to-peerness, it is less usable. Right? You need to download the software. And just a bit more complicated user interface, which is not bad, right? I like the service as well, but HodlHodl is, in my opinion, more of a easy-to-use platform. Although, of course, I don't think it is truly for complete beginners. So if you have, for example, something like the Cash app, which is a custodial, centralized exchange, but focuses really on usability in a way that you can buy Bitcoin with only 1 or 2 clicks. Do you think that a peer-to-peer service like HodlHodl or maybe even BISC can ever reach that level of usability?
No, I think there will be different ways in which you can buy Bitcoin in the future. There will be there will be very, very easy ways to do that. But they would come with a trade-off, obviously, that you're not the owner of your Bitcoin, and you would have to provide all sorts of identification information to the app and potentially to authorities, which is not something that some people might want to do. So the complexity of the interface, it's a trade-off. I think it's necessary. We're trying to simplify it, but sometimes there's just no way around it, right? There will never be a peer-to-peer Bitcoin exchange where you go and there's just one button, buy Bitcoin, and you buy your Bitcoins. That's just not going to happen, right? By definition. But the other concern that a lot of people have when they want to join HodlHodl, they sometimes ask me, but how about the volume? There's no volume. There's no liquidity compared to other exchanges. And I I always disagreed with them, because for a peer-to-peer exchange, you don't need liquidity. You just go there, you create your offer, and you wait for someone to fill it, right? It's not a traditional order book that you would see on centralized exchanges like Bitstamp or Kraken, right? You just go there, create your offer, and pretty sure at some point it's going to be filled, right?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's not for buying a whole Bitcoin or 10 Bitcoin or 100 Bitcoin, right? That's where OTC desks are for. But for regular purchases, $100 every Monday, for example, no issues whatsoever.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it could be used for anything. Large trades, small trades, doesn't really matter. I think, like we see all sorts of trades in our exchange. People trade 0.001 Bitcoin, right? And they trade large amounts as well. I'm not going to name how much, but you can use it for anything. And the cool thing is that when you look at all that, in your mind you go crazy, because you think, Jesus, like it's such a huge amount of money, and technologically it's the same as trading the small amount of money. The technology is the same, everything's the same, right? And that freaks you out a little bit, but then you get used to it.
Yes, and especially just with everyday Bitcoin transactions. I just, to explain to colleague how it works, I send a couple Satoshis, really not much, on chain. It was like the same security assumptions, the same signing method, the same broadcasting, the same network for a transaction that transfers 1,000 Bitcoin. So it truly is insane to have this ubiquitous mechanism of transferring value. So we already talked about the 2 out of 3 feature that you have already added. And you did announce a couple of weeks ago, that you are also going to add not futures, but what did you call it? The betting, right?
I wouldn't use that word. Like honestly, so in the financial world, I think they do call them options. The code word for this new feature that we're developing initially was peer-to-peer futures. But now we decided to change it, and we'll call it prediction contracts, which I think is what it is, right? It's not exactly betting. It's an interesting instrument to manage your risks and to manage your expectations, and to use prediction market for it. So that's what we're working on, and it's going to be launched 2019 February, I suppose. So I think it's just going to be very, very interesting. Let me give you an example of how it would work. So the most basic example is when you want to bet on the price of Bitcoin, but you don't want to actually exchange it into fiat, right? So you don't want to go to your traditional exchanges like Bitstamp or Kraken and deposit the Bitcoins there and they would hold it for you. No, you don't want to do that. You want to say, I predict that the price of Bitcoin is going to be, let's say, below $6,000 in December, right? You're a bear. You decide to do that. You create this offer. Somebody sees the offer, and he sees that you're prepared to bet 1 Bitcoin on it. And he says, OK, I accept the offer. And the odds that you set for the contract is 1-to-1. So this person also locks 1 Bitcoin. So you both lock 1 Bitcoin in escrow each. And then December comes, and you look at the price and decide who wins, right? Both parties would have to agree. And if they disagree, then here comes our key, and we'll look at the contract and we see who wins. But hopefully most contracts would be resolved peacefully without our intervention. So that's the basic idea of how peer-to-peer prediction contracts would work. Again, we don't touch the money, we don't touch the Bitcoins, just to be clear on that, right?
That is really cool. Again, peer-to-peer, right? Non-custodial, so that's important. And the big problem of all this is the oracle, right? Where are you going to get the price from? And it sounds like in your approach, you don't need to have oracle written into the smart contract, right?
No.
You just rely first on the buyer and seller to prediction. How do you call these? Alice and Bob,
Yeah.
And if they themselves find a valid oracle that they trust and that they think is valid, then they sign the contract, right? And if not, where do you look for the information? So you as HodlHodl, where do you get the important information from?
So the first thing we will do, we will moderate offers on which those contracts would be based. So if somebody creates an offer saying, I want to bet on Bitcoin price, and so on and so forth, we'll look at the description. And the description must not be ambiguous, right? The person who bets on the price of Bitcoin should say he expects it to be below or above a certain point at this day, at this time, on this exchange. And then it becomes really easy to determine the outcome for everyone, for us and for both parties, right? And in that case, I think both parties would agree on the outcome, right? Even like the losing party would see no real incentive to disagree, because he knows that, if he disagrees, we would join the dispute and quickly resolve it, because the terms are unambiguous, right? And if the terms are ambiguous and we see that, we just wouldn't approve that offer, and it would never be posted on the website. And I just want to say that this was an example. It was just an example of a contract that is possible, where you can bet on the price of Bitcoin. But essentially, you can bet on many things unless they're illegal or the terms are ambiguous, right? So.
Yeah, really interesting. And for these prediction contracts, do you touch the fiat market on any way, or is it just Bitcoin?
Not at all. That was the point, right? It's peer-to-peer Bitcoin or Litecoin prediction contracts. No fiat involved whatsoever, and we don't even touch the crypto. So that's the beauty of it.
So pretty much, right, in every Bitcoin project, as soon as you touch fiat, all hell breaks loose and everything suddenly no longer works. Because Bitcoin is quite a useful currency, right? Fiat has its problems. So this means you're now with the peer-to-peer prediction markets or contracts, you will not have any problems whatsoever, right? Because it's all in Bitcoin, it's all heaven.
There are always problems. I mean, we... I think if we are trying to build a Bitcoin economy, if we're trying to build a parallel economic system, then this prediction contracts, it's the kind of a tool that needs to exist, because it exists in the traditional financial markets, right? And we just need to do the same or better tool for the Bitcoin ecosystem. So that was the sort of inspiration for us, apart from the fact that we do want to profit on that, of course. But I think it will be very, very useful.
Oh yes, absolutely. And these types of prediction markets are a huge part of price finding, of finding a true and current price of Bitcoin. You need these types of prediction markets, especially for more long-lasting calculations. So if you're an entrepreneur, you might want to know what the market currently thinks a Bitcoin is worth in 1 year, right? And if you want to have this information, you need to have some sort of a future or swap or other financial instrument that looks into the future. So how do you think can we use this information that this marketplace will create?
In many different ways. I think it will shift the, how should I put it? I think Bitcoin, with this financial instrument, Bitcoin becomes a lot more useful in some traditional industries, right? So you can create a Bitcoin prediction contract for, I don't know, the price of oil or price of corn or whatever it is. You can do that, right? And it means that Bitcoin actually becomes a currency, a useful currency, because this is what currencies are used for. Futures are, they're a big part of the traditional economy, and I think Bitcoin predictions are going to be used in the same way for anything out there. Doesn't matter.
Oh, yes, exactly. And inherently, money has always to do something with the future. It's a time-based instrument. There are consumption goods, which are goods that you can consume, right? You eat them up, and then they are gone, and they have satisfied you in some form or another. Then there are production goods, which you can use and intermingle further with your human ingenuity and labor, and increase the production stages until eventually you have the end consumption good again. So production good is used to ultimately build and create a consumption good, which will again satisfy your needs. Money, however, you cannot consume a money. You cannot produce with a money. Rather, it is a store of value and medium of exchange, so that you can postpone your purchasing power of the consumption and production good, and postpone the satisfaction into the uncertain future. So inherently, with any money, there is this future aspect of postponing consumption and increasing your time horizon and decreasing your time preference as you hold more money. So do you think that with these prediction markets, that the spending patterns and the consumption patterns of people might change as well in Bitcoin?
As Eric Waskow said on a conference, prediction is hard. So I completely agree with that. And I actually liked his joke. He said, I predict that 50% of the predictions are going to be wrong. So I'm not even trying to be 50% right here. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's just exciting enough for me to be developing something. I'm just fully focused on writing code and talking to our customers and partners. That's what we're focused on. I think that's the case for many of the useful projects out there. I mean, even with Bitcoin, Satoshi probably did not envision Bitcoin being used in many of the ways in which it is used today. So who knows? I'm just working on a particular instrument that I'm excited about, but who knows? You tell me, what do you think? What do you think is going to be the major use case apart from predicting the price of Bitcoin?
So you work on prediction stuff, but you do not predict yourself. Smart.
Yep, that's correct.
Well, yeah, the true use case, it's interesting. I think a big part is first price finding, right? As we said, that's important. That's what options and futures are used for, and then also hedging, right? For example, if you are a farmer and you have a field, and you grow crops on there, and you predict that in the future it will be rainy and stormy and all these crops will go bad, well, then you should sell these crops at the current price rather than at the future price. Right?
So essentially you bet against yourself just to even out, right?
Exactly, right? And that's hedging your investment. And I do think that this is especially important for those that get paid in Bitcoin, those that earn Bitcoin. And that is, first, the miners, right? They get all of their income in Bitcoin and the Coinbase reward. And so they are all exposed to only Bitcoin. And they need a way of hedging the volatility of the purchasing power of Bitcoin. And I think that's a big market, miners. And then also all other businesses like yours that only work with Bitcoin and don't touch any of the fiat stuff.
I agree. There's a lot of people out there. Actually, that's a good point about miners. I haven't thought about them myself, but definitely, yeah, they need to hedge, and it actually applies to many of the Bitcoin hodlers out there. When there's a bubble, you have an option of going to an exchange and selling it for fiat, and if you're lucky, you catch the top, right? But wouldn't it be just better for many of the hodlers, true hodlers that do not want to entrust their Bitcoins to a traditional exchange, to have an instrument that would allow them to bet against the price rising and just lock their profits? That would be amazing. I think, it applies to pretty much everyone who holds Bitcoins. So I would encourage everyone to go ahead and try it with our testnet. As soon as we release it, we'll let everyone know. It's going to be on testnet, and people would be able to experiment with it and see how it works, and then use it for real. So.
Oh yes, be reckless, but be on testnet. So
Yeah.
First try that out, and for sure here at the WCN we will make sure that you get a demo or something in here as well, because this is interesting fintech. This is actual innovation in financial technology, in money technology. This is so really cool. And
yeah, it's good to see you being so excited about that. I never think about ourselves as sort of innovators, and I always come back to this example where just maybe 4 or 3 months ago, I saw Tone Vays with Jimmy Song on some podcasts. They were discussing HodlHodl Hodl. At the time, an article was released by CoinDesk talking about our exchange, and they were like, "But where's the innovation?" And I completely agree with them, because we're not. No, honestly, we haven't invented any new protocol or anything in Bitcoin. We just we made use of the existing multi-sig technology. We obviously had to write our own library and the user interface, and come up with the right ideas and do all sorts of other work that needed to be done, like penetration testing, making sure security is top notch. But it's hard to say whether it was an innovation or just something that, at the time when me and Max, we started HodlHodl Hodl, we looked at the market, and there was no exchange doing multi-sig, right? In a sense that we do it, where we don't hold the Bitcoins. And it was bizarre, because the technology was there for many years and nobody used it. And we just seized it and started using it. So that's the story. So I don't necessarily think we're innovators in a traditional sense, but we're just trying to create something useful for many people, not just for the selected few who know how to work with crypto and Bitcoin.
Well, you might not be innovative, but absolutely you are wise. Why? Because there is information, right? A non-scarce good, the protocol, just the way of how to do it. And you have accumulated this information, and that's knowledge, right? You know about it. Then as a second step, you sat down and you understood it. You understood how the intrigues of multi-sig work, and how it can be then later in the third stage, and that's the important part, how it can be applied, how true action can be manifested, and the protocol and the information actually be used. So you have probably done like the final step. Other people have built up these ideas and thought about these ideas and helped you on your path of understanding. But actual wisdom, the applying of understood knowledge, is what you did. So I would say that HodlHodl is a perfect example of true wisdom in Bitcoin.
Oh, good to know. Thank you. I appreciate that perspective.
Well, yeah, and you have a lot of other cool stuff that you are working on, and I would still say innovating on, and especially applying that, which is really cool. And one of these things is the house HODL. So how can we use cool multi-signatures and non-custodial peer-to-peer exchanges with houses?
I think it was pretty obvious to us it became obvious to us in 2017 during the last Bitcoin bubble. A friend of mine called me and she said, "I want to sell my apartment in Asia," and she wanted to buy Bitcoin with it. And it was around the time when Bitcoin price went up to like 7,000, and it continued climbing up. And it took her a month to sell her apartment, and then some week and a half to transfer the funds to the Bitcoin exchange. And finally, she was able to buy Bitcoins at around $11,000. And that was crazy, right? Because it was just a waste of time. And we realized if you were able to do that, if you were able to buy and sell real estate with Bitcoin, the whole process would be much, much faster. And there was a lot of demand on both sides, because the people who got rich with Bitcoin, they wanted to buy something. They actually talked to us about it. They wanted to buy property, and there were a lot of people who had a lot of properties, and they wanted to sell and then get Bitcoins as soon as possible. So there's a market fit, but currently we sort of postponed that project because, well, our team is kind of small. We're not a big company, and we wanted to focus on the things that are very important in the immediate term. And we identified prediction contracts as one of those things. HodlHodl is still on the table. It's just that right now the release date is postponed, and we're probably going to make an announcement next year about it for sure. But I think it's a very, very interesting market. We were approached by many real estate developers and agencies, and they were all interested. So.
No, yeah, and Bitcoin is money, right? It can be used for anything and everything, including the purchase of property, of houses, right, and land.
Real estate is an interesting case where it's not exactly buying coffee for Bitcoin, right? It's a fit in a sense that the amounts of the transaction, the amount of Bitcoin sent is kind of worth it, in terms of the fees. So I think it will definitely work in the future, and people will buy and sell real estate and other expensive items with Bitcoin. Whereas like the consumer market would probably migrate to things like Lightning or other technologies that would constitute the second layer.
Exactly right. Bitcoin is extremely secure for double spends. And well, when you give up the property rights on your house or on your land, well, you have to be secure that you get something back in return, because as you said, it is a lot of money. It is a lot of volume. And it does make sense to use Bitcoin, probably the most secure currency that we've yet seen, and especially the most secure digital currency. So if you want to be in the 21st century and use digital money, I would be most comfortable using Bitcoin as the medium of exchange. Yep, and so what was the plan so far on what smart contract type would you use in Bitcoin? Would it be a 2 out of 3 multi-sig again?
Yeah, initially we planned to have 2 out of 3 or maybe more keys, depending on how many parties are involved. So it's all up for discussion. We're still exploring that and talking to our customers, potential customers. I think real estate is, in particular, I think, is a field where everyone would benefit from a traditional N out of M signatures. So it's going to depend on a particular contract and the type of deal that they're trying to make. So.
Yes, but again, MultiSig is probably the killer app for Bitcoin. Right? It's so beautiful. Sharing access to money and doing so in a trustless fashion and a censorship-resistant fashion is extremely novel. And I do think that MultiSig can be used for so much. And I agree with you. I'm rather shocked that not too many entrepreneurs are using it yet, because it really does seem like the perfect tool for a lot of problems that we have in financial economics.
Well, I'll tell you why they're not using it, because even though the technology existed for quite a while now, it takes time to learn how to use it. Like we had to spend time and effort to teach the people that we hired how to use the library, how to add code. We faced a lot of challenges ourselves, like just developing it. So it's not super easy. The technology itself, at its core, it's easy, but even writing something as simple as our library, which is not a lot of lines of code, still requires discipline and requires you to be very, very careful because you're handling money. So that's and it's much easier to just set up a node and set up a Bitcoin wallet and be a centralized exchange. Well, it's not necessarily easier if you do it right. It's not easy, of course. It's just a different type of challenge, maybe a challenge that is more familiar to most developers. So that's why. But I think you're definitely right. MultiSig, I wouldn't call it a killer app of Bitcoin, but it's very, very useful part of Bitcoin. And hopefully next year we're going to make another product that will blow people's minds. I mean, we're still discussing this idea. We're still sort of in the process of discovering the right chemistry with it. But, you know, the potential that we see with this technology and the things we can do with it, and the things that we can do with HodlHodl Hodl, it's just, right now it seems endless. It's just so exciting. So I hope we can announce that at some point next year and really develop it fast. So yeah, that's definitely exciting to have this technology at your hands.
Oh yes, I think that sums up Bitcoin open source entrepreneurship. It's exciting. Lots of ideas and lots of possibilities, and not just thinking about them and innovating, which you absolutely are, but actually applying it and building products that consumers need and really desire is going to be the important task of the future. So I'm really interested in what you got cooking up. And maybe another open source project that really deserves a shilling is probably the most useful multi-sig wallet that we have right now, and that is the Mistos multi-signature wallet, a way to distribute funds. And it's, yeah, as I said, probably the most advanced Bitcoin multi-sig wallet for businesses, emphasizing the frictionless setup and low risk and streamlined collaboration. So with Mistos, it works with Blockstack in the backend, and it provides an easy way of changing the keys that are used in this multi-sig wallet. And so if you want to add members to the multi-sig, or if you want to push members out, you can easily do this in this type of setup. So this is especially useful for companies, right? If you have a company that has collective control over some funds, it's super useful well, to use. And question for you would be, how do you use multi-sig for HodlHodl as an internal business? Do you use it for distributing the funds maybe throughout the board members, you and Max, or distributing funds out to employees? Or are there any ways that you use multi-sig within your company?
Well, I'm not going to talk about this right now, but I think we're definitely going to come back to that in the future. There are reasons I don't want to talk about it right now. But regarding the wallet that you mentioned, I think I've never heard of it. It might actually be very interesting, because I think wallets these days, I mean, I wish we had time to, and energy and focus to work on another wallet, because they definitely lack a lot of features that would be very useful. And one of those things, when you said like you can rotate keys or something, or add new keys, I think it definitely might be something useful for businesses. So yeah, I've never heard about this wallet. Maybe if you can send me the link, I will check it out and maybe shill it on Twitter if it's worth it.
Oh yeah, Mistos is really cool. It's not perfect, still early phase, and a lot of improvement to have, of course, but at least it's working. It truly is working, and a couple demos are on the World Crypto Network, and lots of other cool videos as well. And try it out. As I said, not perfect, still needs a lot of finishing, but for that, what it is, actually quite a useful, especially for distributing funds throughout a community, and especially companies.
Right. So one thing I want to mention that I think people would might really be interested in. I've just posted this on Twitter today, asking people whether they would be interested in joining us in Singapore for the Bitcoin Masterclass. And the idea is to gather people, both technical people, that is developers, and non-developers, to teach them the basics of Bitcoin in all sorts of senses. So for example, starting with, how to set up your Bitcoin wallet safely, what kinds of wallets are there, but then also how to buy or sell Bitcoin, how to exchange it, what kinds of different exchanges you can use, actually show them how to do that, because especially when it comes to peer-to-peer exchanges, a lot of people are confused. The first time I used local Bitcoins, I almost lost my money because I was not familiar with how to use escrow. local Bitcoins, and I clicked release Bitcoins accidentally before I actually received fiat. So you got to be really careful. And then maybe also talk about how to start a Bitcoin business. What kind of challenges you would face? How to hire developers, how to find the right market fit, anything really. I think HodlHodl in general, and the members of our team in particular, they have a lot of experience in the field. I mean, most of us have been in Bitcoin for quite a while, so we've seen a lot of things and we know a lot of things. And I think it's important to share this knowledge, because these days people come to Bitcoin, yeah, they want to make money. I get it. Everyone wants that. But you also need some discipline. You also need knowledge and understanding of how to handle things. And we want to provide real value and educate people to the best of our abilities. So guys, if you're interested in joining our masterclass in Singapore, it's not official yet. We haven't announced it yet. We're just exploring whether people are interested in it. But if you are, reach out on Twitter or Telegram and tell us, yeah, I would come. And I think it's a lovely idea. We would love to hear that. So let us know.
The thing is, if there is a true Bitcoin company that started out only with Bitcoin and is only touching the cryptocurrency Libra money world, has a lot of open source software, is contributing a lot to the community, is organizing one of probably the best Bitcoin conferences in Riga with the Baltic Honey Badger, and has a lot of innovation and actually applying the wisdom that we have here. If these people are telling you that, they probably have one or two things to teach you. So if you think that HodlHodl is a cool company, which I absolutely agree, and if you know Roman and Max in person, then you know that these two are actually cool guys as well, and they are worth listening to. So absolutely, I'm psyched about this masterclass, because I do think that sharing this information is always the first step, and helping people to understand it and apply it is just as important. So the masterclass sounds absolutely amazing, and I would love to join. Although Singapore is quite on the other side of the world for me. I will somehow try to make it happen.
Yeah, Singapore is far away from Europe, but I mean, we had a Bitcoin conference in Europe, and we thought we should cover Asia in some way. There's a lot of Bitcoin conferences in Asia, so we wanted to do something different. And Singapore itself, like, we have large OTC traders, partners in Singapore, and they say Singapore as a country and as a business community is very, very interested in crypto and very open to it. So, and we thought it would be the right kind of fit to hold the masterclass there. So
you already mentioned a little bit on what the content is for this masterclass, but what is the teaching method? So is it going to be lectures and you have to sit in class and listen and don't talk? Or is it going to be more of a hackathon where you actually build stuff? Or how do you handle the teaching?
I think it's going to be everything. So there will be lectures where we just explain things first, and then we maybe show things like on our computers how to, let's say, sign up on local Bitcoins or HodlHodl and perform a trade, or how to sign up on some other exchange, right? Like Bitstamp and Kraken, and how to do day trading. Not the strategies, because we're not traders, but just like the basics of it. And then when it comes to the practical part, yeah, we want people to actually like try and do it for themselves under our supervision. So it's going to be a mix of everything, and we hope to provide as much value as possible. But the point is, I think it's important to cover as many topics as possible, as many things that people can later go ahead and explore on their own, to just give them direction, because you can never gather a room of people that would all be interested in just one thing. Not everyone will be interested in how to trade with Bitcoin. Some of those people will be interested in how to build a business. Some of them would be interested in how to just buy and hold Bitcoins in their own wallets, right? So we just want to give as much direction as possible, and then let people be able to actually ask the right kind of questions later, be it on Google or on Stack Overflow or others, or Quora or Twitter or anywhere. Just explore for themselves and teach them how to continue growing and learning as much as possible at a fast pace. So that's the value proposition here.
And the thing with Bitcoin is it's not one-dimensional. It's quite multi-dimensional, and I do think it requires holistic information and holistic understanding. So a lot of different fields are of interest. It's not just the software, it's not just cryptography, it's not just the economics and monetary theory, it's not just the game theory and social side of it. It's all of this together and a lot more. And I think the best way of learning Bitcoin is falling down the rabbit hole and trying to learn as much as you can in as many different places that you are interested in. So this is quite interesting, and I do agree with you that you have to have a broad array of topics that you want to discuss in these teachings.
And there's definitely going to be some talks about like economics and history of Bitcoin, in the sense that where it all came from, why was it invented? Because a lot of people don't know those things or never think about them because maybe they're not important up to a point, right? And I think it is important to talk about why Satoshi invented Bitcoin. What was nobody knows for sure, but we have a lot of forum posts from Satoshi and other evidence, and just point them in the direction where they can learn more about it, read the right kinds of books if they're interested in the theoretical side of Bitcoin, in economics and why it exists. So yeah, it's going to be lots of interesting stuff, and we're probably going to publish the agenda sometime this month, so people have a clear idea of what we're proposing.
Really cool, and we're looking forward to this agenda and curious what vast array of topics you will discuss. And of course, the question is, who is going to be the teacher? Who is going to convey this information and support on the path towards understanding?
That's first of all, it's going to be me. And there's also going to be one member of our team as well, who's very, very familiar with the exchange and has been working with us from the very beginning. Very smart guy. And maybe one surprise speaker who's not part of our team, but who's sort of associated with us and is very knowledgeable as well. It's all up in the air right now. We're going to announce it this month, along with the agenda. But definitely, those people that are going to be speakers, they should be knowledgeable, and the goal for them is to provide clear value to all of the participants.
Oh yes, absolutely. And the expectations are quite high because I've been to the Baltic Honey Badger conference, and I've seen the quality and depth of speakers that you can get together. So I'm sure that even here for this masterclass in Singapore, the teachers are going to be quite of a good character.
Yeah, the important thing is that the content is the reason we're not really looking to invite a lot of different speakers. We want to control the content. I think it's very important when you're trying to teach something. And I personally do have experience teaching people programming. So I've been doing that for a number of years, some time ago. So I know a couple of things about how to teach people. And I hopefully would come up with the right kind of content. And that's going to be really helpful.
Oh yes, and teaching is a skill, and I do feel that with being in Bitcoin longer and longer, you learn this skill much more because people have a lot of questions about Bitcoin. Right? It's an intriguing subject, and nobody has a lot of information about it. And then when people want to know more, and they ask you questions, as you being the only Bitcoin nerd that they know, well, you're going to have to repeat the same explanations over and over again and try to convey the same ideas and the same theory but in different forms, in different words. And this will give you much more of a tool and know-how of conveying this information in a way that it is understandable. So you learn as you grow with that. You grow as you learn with that. And especially, I do think when you have found a way of actually explaining something, you have fully understood it. And if you can support others in their path of understanding, that, again, is true wisdom.
Yeah, and I think it's for us, it's the right time to do that because we've been in the field for such a long time. In Bitcoin terms, a long time, 6 years, right? And I think a lot of novices who sort of like, well, let's call them novices who've been into Bitcoin for like 2 years, for example, they're quite knowledgeable already. But I think when it comes to teaching, people tend to repeat the things that they hear without actually processing them deeply. And that's what I will try to avoid when teaching things, because different people are interested in different parts of Bitcoin. You cannot push your own agenda. You cannot tell people what you actually think Bitcoin is. You need to provide different points of views. You need to give different kinds of examples and adjust. I think it's very, very important because if you have an agenda, be it a political one, a social one, or just an agenda to make money off these people, right? They can sense it, they can see that, and that's not something we're interested in. We really want to give people something useful. At least that's my motivation. Once again, we're not going to make a lot of money out of this, for sure. Just like we haven't made a lot of money on the conference. It was just a great event, and we want to teach people because for us, the money is with our project, HodlHodl. Hodl. You know, this is where we believe in the future, where we can make money and lots of other people can make money simply because it provides value. And with the masterclass, I think it's just a way to educate people.
Perfect. And that is one way that you can support Bitcoin, right? It's education. It's sharing this information. And especially because Bitcoin is open source, right? Because Bitcoin is this Libre software that you can use without permission and without paying for, then you have this responsibility of making sure that the software is actually useful and working. So that it is a responsibility to make sure that the code is in order and that there's a lot of testing and good features in the code and everything. But also, of course, other things, like, for example, organizing these conferences that you're doing and getting the people together in the right place and making sure that there is this conversation. Or, you know, helping people with using Bitcoin in their business and everyday life. So what are some other ways that you think people can support Bitcoin as an entire ecosystem and make sure that this money grows and is prosperous?
Great question. I think there are many ways in which people can support Bitcoin. There are a lot of people who are very excited about Bitcoin, but they don't actually have any money to buy Bitcoin because they need to support their families. They have day jobs. They don't have any free money, right? That they can freely invest. But they can support Bitcoin in other ways. They can apply for a job at a Bitcoin company like ours, or they can just simply learn about Bitcoin as much as possible and then talk to other people as much as possible about it, including people who actually have money. You know, the first time I learned about Bitcoin, I didn't have any money back then. I just started talking Bitcoin to other people and well, I wouldn't say trying to convince them to buy. I was just sort of so excited about it, as every new recruit would be excited about Bitcoin, right? But I was talking to people and I was trying to convey this idea that Bitcoin offered. But eventually nobody listened and I had to buy Bitcoin myself. But I think it's still important to sort of spread the information. And then some people would prefer to start a Bitcoin business, right? Maybe they don't want to buy Bitcoin, but they want to invest in in businesses or start their own business that does something actually useful. And it's very hard to distinguish sometimes between, especially for people who are not familiar with Bitcoin, to distinguish whether this business is just to sort of, rip off everyone else and make money off them, or if this is something that's aimed that is supposed to be long-term. That's something that would actually benefit the Bitcoin ecosystem. So there's a lot of ways in which people can contribute, and if you can't contribute in this one particular way, do not think that this is it for you. That I see a lot of people sort of, especially in this bear market recently, they sort of lost motivation and their excitement about Bitcoin. And I myself lost a little bit of excitement for Bitcoin. Like I'm honestly more excited about the people that I work with, the people that I saw at the conference, because I see their excitement about it. I love it. I love writing code. I love working with my team and other people in the industry. So don't get upset if you can't just buy Bitcoin. Just do something else that helps the technology. I think that's the message.
Oh yes, and you always hear that, oh, I want to support Bitcoin, but I cannot code, I cannot program. I can neither. Does it mean I cannot contribute to the Bitcoin core GitHub? Well, kind of, not really though. There's even a lot of documentation that you can do, a lot of explaining in the code and everything. So you can even do that. But even if you don't touch the code and the GitHub at all, there is 1,001 other tasks that we need to do in order to make sure that Bitcoin is this working currency. And explaining, educating, using, building businesses, and all this is really, really, really thoroughly needed. So it's not just coding. It's not just one thing. Bitcoin is money. Therefore, it is for everyone and anyone. And whoever wants to support it and wants to grow this ecosystem, well, now you have our permission of doing so.
Yeah, although you don't need one because it's Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. And what I truly like and treasure about HodlHodl Hodl is the fact that, as far as I know, you don't have any fiat bank account. Right?
We don't.
And you don't hold any fiat currency. So
no, we don't.
Why and how?
What do you mean? Like, all the trades are between our users. They're peer-to-peer. So we don't actually need to transfer fiat to anyone. It's just that, two sides of the deal, they transfer value between each other. One person sends Bitcoin, the other person sends fiat currency directly to this other person's account in a bank or a payment system. That's it. That's why we don't touch fiat. I think that's the way to go.
Isn't that beautiful? They don't use fiat because they don't need it. Because, well, it's a shitcoin, right? And what is so truly interesting is that, of course, Bitcoin is volatile, right? In the purchasing power, not in the monetary base, which is important. But you still get the argument, oh, it's so volatile, and your profits are going to diminish the one day and shoot through the roof the other day. And I like the approach of parallel police, where they say every time that they have short-term costs. So if they have a barista coming to the Bitcoin cafe, he sells the coffee, right? So they have Bitcoin cash flow coming in. And then at the end of the day, the barista is being paid out. So for these short-term costs, they pay them as fast as possible so that they have the cash flow coming in at price A, and they have cash flow coming out a couple hours after. So the price is not yet changed.
That's a little bit disingenuous, because the thing is that they're sort of they're shifting the cost of exchanging Bitcoin onto somebody else, in that case their employee, right? Let's be clear about that. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but people should understand what they're doing. I think with financial instruments such as prediction markets, it would become actually possible to not touch fiat and at the same time to lock your profits. So there are ways to bypass the fiat system. We don't actually need to touch it as much as people think we need it. Because you know, it's every time there's a bear market, there are those guys on Twitter. I don't know where they come from, but they always like, oh, so here you go, Bitcoin guys. You know, it's just you thought you don't need fiat, but you actually do need it because you want to lock your profits. And hey, look at Bitcoin; it's not doing that well, right? And it doesn't actually matter. Price doesn't actually matter. There are ways to lock your profits and avoid holding fiat for sure.
Yeah, and I like your approach of saying, well, we don't need it, so we don't use it. And that truly shows, a Bitcoin bliss, the utopia of a true Bitcoin economy, when we have built a better system. Now we're only going to use the better system, and we're going to discard the old system, the bad system that is not as useful. Why? Because it just makes logical sense. So that is beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, there's a lot of hassle in using the existing financial system. You know, having a bank account, and you have to deal with all the bullshit the banks usually make you deal with. So we just don't want to touch it, and we don't have to. That's true.
Perfect. So again, if you think that true Bitcoin entrepreneurs that have been doing, how long has HodlHodl HodL been around?
We launched our mainnet version in March this year, and testnet was actually live for 7 to 8 months prior to that. So that's how long.
Yeah. So again, the masterclass in Singapore, if you think that true Bitcoin entrepreneurs who have been using this currency for a long time might deserve your attention, and that they probably have you to teach you a thing or two, go to Singapore, masterclass. I'm sure it's worth it.
Yep.
Okay, we have already talked about a lot, futures and the prediction contracts, and house hodl and hedging, and how to use Bitcoin, and of course the 2 out of 3 multi-sig. So we have already covered a lot of ground, but what I'm still curious is how you at HodlHodl HodL might want to integrate cross-chain atomic swaps. So a exchange of 2 currencies, especially cryptocurrencies, that are atomic in a sense that there is no counterparty risk, right? Either the trade goes through or it doesn't. So with a cross-chain atomic swap, do you still need HodlHodl HodL as the arbitrator?
Well, you would still need the interface through which you would discover offers that other people have. So you would need HodlHodl HodL. Actually, one thing I want to mention, we just released the new version of HodlHodl HodL today, and we have a new payment methods. We added a number of cryptocurrencies, right? So you can exchange your favorite cryptocurrency into Bitcoin and back, or into Litecoin and back. It's not cross-atomic swaps, but it uses the same escrow mechanism that we have right now. But instead of like fiat, you would send crypto on its own blockchain, and HodlHodl HodL wouldn't see that. So that's kind of marginally useful, I think. But when it comes to atomic swaps, you see, we as an exchange choose not to focus on other cryptocurrencies, and the only reason we actually added Litecoin was because it implemented SegWit before Bitcoin. And I remember it was summer 2017, and we sat down with Max and I said, hey, Bitcoin is really technologically close to Bitcoin, already implemented SegWit, let's add it. So we did that. But I think adding new cryptocurrencies to the stack is actually quite dangerous because it increases the attack surface. And you've got to be really mindful about that. So we don't have any plans to add new cryptocurrencies to the stack, but you can use them as payment methods already.
Oh yes, and you hear a lot of stories that people download the client for some shady currency that they have no clue about, and it has a Trojan inside or something, right? And it gets their keys and puts a keylogger on, and well, there goes your Bitcoin. Haven't done anything wrong with Bitcoin itself, but well, you've used a shitcoin and was an insecure one, and that's an attack factor. So absolutely, you have to be careful, especially because for HodlHodl, you actually do need to run the implementations of these currencies and check the blockchain. So there's a lot of things going on in the back end that are a possible attack vector, and you have to minimize that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's just even supporting Litecoin is kind of an additional workload, and we just once again we have a small team. We need focus, and we're trying to do our best with Bitcoin and Litecoin, and I think that's enough for now.
Yeah, probably a quite reasonable approach. And you hear that, for example, the General Bytes, they have great ATMs, right? Great point of sale system, several different currencies on there. However, no SegWit. And I was like, so, well, SegWit is over a year old. It's been testing months before that. And we knew it was coming. We know it's a net positive pretty much in every way. Why have you not yet integrated that? And Martin said, well, we want to, but we don't have the resources to. We don't have the developers to. And those few developers that we do have, they are focusing on integrating Ethereum and the ERC20 contracts because some people want to have that. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool to have CryptoKitties on your ATM, but let's make sure that the sound money-based currency, Bitcoin, is most up-to-date, right, and most efficient. So not bashing General Bytes, right, and that's, of course, they do it for their users. But still, it's, for me as a person who pretty much only uses Bitcoin, it's disappointing, although, not my business.
Well, and also I can tell you that implementing SegWit is probably more difficult than adding another cryptocurrency, in a sense that to add another cryptocurrency, especially to a centralized exchange, you just download the client, read the documentation on how to run it, and that's pretty much it, right? Whereas adding SegWit, especially in our case, we would need to actually write some code in our library that is pretty low level. And you need talented developers to do that. So it's difficult.
Oh yeah, and even small things that you wouldn't think about. For example, for General Bytes, they have a receipt that comes out of the ATM. That the width of the receipt is not wide enough so that it can support the entire Bech32 address. So they would have to push that on 2 lines. Right? Something you don't think about, but it's a tiny thing that just makes it that much more difficult to implement.
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of Bitcoin exchanges they don't support. They claim to support SegWit, but they don't actually support SegWit. And one example of that would be, actually 2 examples of that would be Kraken and Bitstamp. They both claim to be supporting SegWit, but if you try and paste a Bech32 address into a withdrawal field on Bitstamp, for example, it would show you an error. Why is that? I actually contacted their support, and they said, sorry, we don't support Bech32 addresses. It's on our to-do list, but we don't currently do that. Although we do support SegWit. I don't know how. I mean, you probably support like more traditional Bitcoin addresses. They're actually SegWit addresses, but it's just it doesn't make sense. But Bitstamp, I'm not saying Bitstamp is a bad exchange. I think they're great. Lots of cool things going on there. And it just all goes to say that adding something new is not easy, even if it seems so to the outside observer. So guys, when you look at any exchange out there, be mindful of the fact that people are actually working really, really hard to deliver the features and deliver quality code and security.
Oh yes, absolutely, and they're actually getting it done. They're actually building something and making sure that their customers are satisfied, and that's absolutely a valid service. And so it's always difficult to give critical feedback, right, and make sure that everyone is playing on their A game, but still emphasizing that they're still doing great work and making sure that we build up this new ecosystem. So pretty much everyone who is pedaling in the right direction deserves our support, but still critical feedback and making sure that tomorrow is going to be a bit better than today.
Yeah, agreed.
So Roman, we have talked, as I said, about a lot of stuff. So maybe as the exit question, is there anything we have not yet talked about, or anything that you'd like to emphasize?
Trick question. Let me think. Well, I just want to invite everyone to the next Baltic Honey Badger in 2019. We still haven't announced that because it's too early. We're probably going to announce that after the masterclass that we're holding next year in March, maybe. And then after that, we're going to announce the conference. But I was really excited about the 2018 version, the second Honey Badger that we held in Riga. There was over 600 participants, and we're probably going to have more next year. So we're looking forward to it, and I would like to welcome everyone to come to the conference and see for yourself. We had a lot of questions last year. People asking us, why should we come to the conference? There's going to be a live broadcast that is free. We can just watch that. And I told them, but the value is that you actually get to talk to people. And there were lots and lots of interesting conversations at the conference that you would never have unless you actually went there. Lots of knowledge, lots of experience and wisdom shared. And next year is going to be more exciting. I'm absolutely certain about that.
And I really want to thank you personally for making sure that you do broadcast this information and release it outside from this locked in time and space of just Riga, just on these days, but releasing it to everyone and the entire globe at any time, hopefully forever if the internet stays up. So releasing this information, because information is a non-scarce good, is extremely valuable in getting the idea out. However, I 100% agree with you. The information, although it is really important and great that you share it, the experience is so much more worthy. And getting a chance to talk to virtually the legends and heroes of Bitcoin is amazing, right? And getting a chance to discuss and advance our theory and topic is beautiful. And me, having experienced the Baltic Honey Badger conference, I can say for 1000% certainty that I will be there next year, hopefully on both. If you really end up doing two conferences, at least at one in Riga. And it's really one of the, if not the best Bitcoin conferences. And it's a very enjoyable event, not just the information, not just the talks. I actually did not watch one talk live at the conference. I talked to the people, right? Because the information was recorded. I could get the information secondhand. Then a couple days after, actually prolonging my Riga Baltic Honey Badger experience. But the 3 days that
Can I have the same experience, because I needed to manage a lot of things at the conference, and I haven't had a chance to watch the talks. I did that afterwards because everything was recorded. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The experience itself is very important. And then you also talk to the people whom you don't necessarily agree with, and they're still great guys, and girls. They're excellent people. Because on Twitter, well, when you disagree with someone, it turns into a huge fight, right? And people start blocking each other, which is insane. I still don't know. We had a number of people at the conference who blocked each other before on Twitter, and they were still in the same room talking to each other. I think it really puts a different perspective when you talk to a person face to face, and you're not you don't feel compelled to be rude. You feel compelled to listen to the arguments and actually respond and talk intelligently and make friends. I think that is a great place to make friends. So very proud and happy to host the Baltic Honey Badger as a person and as a friend of Max and the co-founder of Hodl Hodl.
Oh yes, absolutely. Again, amazing conference. Check it out. Check out the recordings if you haven't, though. beautiful content, absolutely worth listening to. And shameless plug, check out the WCN talks and interviews during the conference, because we got out, I think, exactly that. We got out the experience talking to the people off air or off stage, right? And just having a casual conversation with some of the amazing people there. But the best content is unfortunately locked in time and space, only for those people that are experiencing the conference in person. Although we try to share as much of it as possible, I go back and read Jameson Lobb's tweet storm. That was fantastic. And still, the true experience and being in the same meet space room is what this conference is all about. So yeah, Roman, was a pleasure talking to you again, and hopefully we're going to continue the conversation off air and then on Twitter and Telegram and all the places. So Piers, if you like HodlHodl, check it out. Try it, HodlHodl.com. Try it on testnet if you like it. Get a couple Satoshis. Buy Bitcoin every Monday. And I think HodlHodl is the perfect exchange to do so. It's peer-to-peer. It's non-custodial. And it's not so decentralized. So quite useful as well.
Right. Thank you, Max, for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you again, Rowan, very much. And Piers, see you on the next show. Bye-bye.